Alright, this is my blazer. Those are my dash lights. They're blue LEDs. Exactly the same as the ones I got down there. Just individual LEDs. I had a few extras, so I stuck them there. But the problem that I've been having is a few of them don't come on all the time. So went over to Princess Auto and I picked up a couple of sets of these blue flexible LED strips, waterproof, everything like that. So I'm going to replace those. I'm going to put one in the top inside the gauge cluster, one in the bottom, and get rid of those blue LEDs overall. So the first thing you do to get the dash apart, remove the panel underneath. A couple of screws come out, the panel pops off. Take the screws out of each side for these things, and then you'll be able to get to the 4 bolts that are behind this plastic casing, and then you can basically pull everything straight on out. Okay, so I unplugged the switches. I plugged them back in just so I can play with the lights if I need to. This side I took the faceplate off. It's 4 1/4 inch nuts on the back, and then the faceplate comes off up here with all of its pieces. And then you can kind of tip this thing upwards and slide it through the hole on the casing. Get the casing out. Take the 4 bolts off for the gauge clusters, one on each corner, and then the whole thing's loose. What you gotta do next, there's 2 plastic clips here that hold the actual wiring harness in. You gotta push those out as you're pulling the dash off. Pull the cluster out all at once. Don't forget, there's a little clip under here. Clips onto the steering column. It actually adjusts the needle setting where the would give you the unhook that before you decide to pull the dash out. So I unhooked the harness, I pulled it loose, and there she goes, one piece. All my lights are on the back, everything's done. Well, I laid 1 flex strip down inside the casing, and I mounted 1 flex strip to the actual gauge backing itself. So now when I set it together, I'm going to have light coming from both the top and the bottom. Should be much better than before. And plus, in the dim areas, I'm still leaving the old bulbs, the old blue LED bulbs from the backlight and behind. When you're pushing this thing back together, before you go and jam it, start smashing everything together, look on the back. You got 3 pins here that you can look through and see when the pins are lined up. You got 4 pins here. You got a clip here, you got a clip over this way, and then you got 2 here. Make sure everything lines up, you know, gently. Don't just jam it together. Kind of feel, you'll be able to tell when they're clicked in all the way. You can tell when everything's going the way it should. You don't want to start forcing this stuff because it's so delicate, especially with the age. Like, this is 17 years old, so you want to be careful with this stuff. Make sure it's still going to work when you're all done. Well, I just brought this whole case back into my truck, plugged it in, turned the ignition on, made sure all the gauges moved. What I did was I just gently, ever so slightly, moved all the gauges to ridiculous settings. Like this one I moved up with the screw. The speedometer I pushed over. The gas gauge, I know I had about half a tank, I put it to full. And same thing with everything else. Move it a little bit so when you turn the key on the ignition you can clearly see when it pops and when it moves. So that way you know that it's hooked up. Everything's going to work the way it should. You're not going to have to pull this thing apart again. So now I'm going to put the screws back in, clean the backing here, clean the lens, put it all back together. I've got my new LED leads coming out the back. I'm going to tie those into the switch for the actual running lights instead of this board itself. It's a lot safer to tie it into the switch in a place that's going to be accessible. Much easier too, safer. Okay, just plugged it all back in, and I just temporarily hooked up some 12-volt power for these backlights before I tie them in. I wanted to see how it looked, so let's just set this on the wheel here. This is the original backlight. You can see the side ones are kind of lighting up. I removed some of the bulbs, and mind you, the new LEDs are blocking some of the old light path. Pretty dim. So now the new stuff is this. In addition to a little bit extra, kind of takes care of a few of the little missing letters, and the bottom corner, which I wasn't too happy with, fixes it up. So everything looks pretty equally bright, and I'll actually be able to read the odometer now. It certainly looks like I will, at least. Before it used to be dim. Now I shouldn't have a problem at all. Sweet. And of course, the gauges still match the pillars that I have here. They glow blue, the same thing. Awesome. Now I'm just going to wire this in through behind the dash. I'm going to come out here and tie into the switch, so when I flip the switch for the running lights, everything on the dash will come on at the same time. Well, all finished. I actually painted the black casing there. I had set up with some primer months and months ago. Never actually painted it, and decided finally to throw a coat of paint just to see how it was going to look. I might do the accents black, like the trim plate around the stereo, the pieces around the grills on each side. You know, kind of make it all blend together, but just doing it to see if I like it. So, what I did, changed all the backlights inside again. I had individual LEDs in the back. I had like 7 back there. Didn't like the way it looked. One of them kept going out on me. It was a bad connection on the board, so I replaced it with 2 9-inch strips, one at the top, one at the bottom, both blue LEDs. Turn those babies on. It's bright like the sun. You can dim it down just a little bit with the dimmer. That's as low as it'll go. Still bright like crazy. Might even be too much light, but if I drive like this, it's not so bad. And look, now I can finally actually read the odometer when I'm driving at night. That's irritating. So another thing I did, the interior light. I had a couple extra blue strips, so I tied them into the interior light. Just going to take out that regular bulb there, so it just keeps a nice solid blue color. So whenever the doors are flipped open, bang, get a nice blue light on the floor.